Today I'm going to tell you a story that will take you deep inside a naval base where loyalty, secrets, and honor collide. This story is not just about a woman in handcuffs. It's about courage that refuses to bow and a past that even the highest ranks remember insolence. The storm over the Pacific had barely settled when the Navy's elite security team dragged her across the tarmac. Her wrists were bound tight in cold steel cuffs, her uniform drenched with rain and salt water. The officers around her whispered, uncertain of what to make of the quiet woman they had just arrested. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Hale stood with her chin high, eyes fixed straight ahead. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. But there was something about her, something that made even the seasoned officers uneasy. "Bring her in," ordered Captain Briggs. His voice was sharp, his uniform spotless despite the chaos. "We'll let the Admiral deal with her." They led her through the corridors of the naval base, past portraits of heroes, past echoes of footsteps that had once belonged to legends. The lights flickered as thunder rolled in the distance. Sarah was accused of infiltrating a restricted zone during an active operation. To most it looked like treason, but to her it was something else, unfinished business. Inside the interrogation room she sat across from Captain Briggs. The cuffs clinked every time she moved her wrists. "You have no clearance for that section," Briggs said coldly. "You're not even on the active roster anymore. Who are you working for?" Sarah said nothing. "I asked you a question, Lieutenant Commander," he snapped. "Answer before you call in the MPs." She lifted her eyes, calm but piercing. "You wouldn't understand," she said softly. Briggs slammed his hand on the table. "Try me." Sarah leaned forward and for a moment the room went silent. The rain outside grew louder. The thunder deeper. "I was there long before you ever wore that uniform," she said. "And the place you're guarding, it's not just a base. It's a graveyard for those who were forgotten." Briggs frowned. "You're delusional." He stood up and signaled the guards. "Take her to holding until the Admiral arrives. Maybe he'll remember who you are." As they escorted her out, one of the guards noticed the ink on her wrist, the tattoo partly hidden beneath her sleeve. It was old, faded, but unmistakable, a trident wrapped around a broken anchor. He froze. "Sir," the guard said hesitantly, "you might want to see this." Briggs glanced over impatiently, but when his eyes caught the tattoo, his face went pale. "That can't be," he whispered. The mark was known only among the highest ranks. The Silent Depths, an experimental unit that had been erased from the records after a classified mission years ago. No one who served in that unit was ever supposed to exist again. "Where did you get that tattoo?" Briggs demanded. Sarah met his eyes. "I earned it." By the time Admiral James Rowan arrived, word had already spread through the base. Officers whispered in corners, wondering if their rumors were true. The Admiral entered the interrogation room with a slow, deliberate stride. His presence was commanding, the kind that silenced a crowd without a single word. He looked at Sarah, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned to Briggs. "Why is she handcuffed?" "Sir," Briggs began, "she breached a classified area. She claims to have been part of aid-commissioned unit. I thought it best to release her." The Admiral interrupted. His tone was low but absolute. "Sir?" The Admiral's eyes hardened. "I said release her. That tattoo is not for pretenders." Briggs hesitated, but one look from Rowan and he obeyed. The click of the cuffs unlocking echoed through the silent room. Sarah rubbed her wrists, the faint marks of restraint visible under the harsh fluorescent light. The Admiral sighed. "It's been a long time, Commander Hale." Sarah looked up. "You still remember some things," Rowan said quietly. "You never forget." The others were dismissed, leaving only the Admiral and Sarah in the room. He leaned against the table. "When I got the report that someone had breached the perimeter, I didn't expect it to be you. You vanished after the Black Tide mission. We thought you were gone." "I was," she said, "but I came back when I heard they reopened the vault." Rowan's expression darkened. "That vault is classified beyond your clearance." "What did you hope to find there?" "The truth," she said simply. "You buried it, Admiral. The whole team, my brothers, my sisters, they didn't die in action. They were sacrificed." Rowan's face went still. "Careful, Sarah. You knew," she continued. "The mission wasn't about recovery. It was about containment. And when things went wrong, you erased us." The Admiral exhaled deeply. "You don't know the whole story, then tell me." He walked to the window, staring at the storm outside. The Silent Depths were created to test unorthodox strategies during deep-sea operations. What happened out there? It was beyond our control. We lost more than just a team. We almost lost the fleet. Sarah's voice trembled, not with fear but rage. And instead of admitting the truth, you turned us into ghosts. Rowan turned to her, his eyes weary. You think I wanted that? You think it didn't haunt me every day since? The silence is stretched. Finally, Sarah pulled a small rusted data drive from her pocket and set it on the table. I found this in the wreckage of the old base. It has the mission logs. Admiral, the proof of what really happened. Rowan stared at it, his hands tightening behind his back. You realize what that means? If that data gets out, it'll destroy careers. Maybe even the Navy itself. Sarah looked to Thim, her eyes filled with years of betrayal and pain. Maybe that's what needs to happen. Hours later, the Admiral walked her to the docks. The rain had eased and the ocean stretched endlessly before them. Where will you go now? He asked. Back to where it all began, she said softly. Someone has tormented them. Rowan nodded slowly. If you release that data, you'll make a lot of enemies. I already have, she said. He almost smiled. You haven't changed. Sarah turned to leave, but then paused. Admiral, thank you for what? For remembering. He watched her walk away, her figure disappearing into the mist like a shadow from another lifetime. 4 days later, a classified leak hit military channels. The black tide operation, long erased from history, was exposed. The reports told of a covert experiment gone wrong of soldiers sent to die to cover the truth. The world didn't know Sarah's name. Her face never appeared in the news. But inside the Navy, whispers spread about the woman who returned from the dead to speak for those who couldn't. And in the Admiral's private quarters, he sat alone staring at an old photo. 7 officers in black wetsuits standing by a submarine, smiling before their final mission. At the edge of the photo, Sarah Hale's face shone with quiet confidence. He whispered to the empty room, "Forgive me." Weeks later, Sarah stood on a cliff overlooking the sea. She wore civilian clothes now, but the tattoo on her wrist still marked her as something the world would never understand. The wind carried the sound of waves crashing against Therox. She held a folded flag in her hands, one for each of the fallen. You were never forgotten, she murmured. They just didn't have the courage to remember. The sun broke through the clouds, painting the ocean in gold. For the first time in years, she smiled. And that, my friends, is the story of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Hale, a ghost of the deep who refused to stay silent. She fought not for glory but for truth, even when the world turned its back. Because sometimes the bravest battles are not fought on the front lines, but in the shadows of memory. If you felt something in your heart while listening to this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.